They're calling him the worst quarterback in the NFL, worse than Marcus Russell, worse than any late-round flyer or draft bust you can remember. To hear some analysts talk, Shadur Sanders isn't just struggling, he's already been declared a failed experiment. Statistically hopeless. A lost cause. But there's something they're not telling you. Because while the numbers might scream disaster, there's a completely different story unfolding on film. One that's got former players, analysts, and even his harshest critics taking a second look. And the real twist, this isn't just about Shadur Sanders. It's about a franchise that's been butchering quarterbacks for 30 years and might be doing it again. What started as a heated on-air debate turned into a full-blown exposé of just how broken the Cleveland Browns truly are. And the way this debate unfolded, it didn't just shift the narrative, it shattered it. So forget everything you've heard. Because this debate isn't about a quarterback anymore. It's about a system that eats quarterbacks alive, and the question no one in Cleveland wants to answer. What if Shadur Sanders is just the latest casualty of something much bigger? Jason Lloyd didn't walk into that studio looking for a debate. He came in like a man on a mission, armed with charts, spreadsheets, historical databases, and cold-blooded analytics ready to bury any lingering hope about Shadur Sanders. It wasn't opinion. It wasn't hot-take theater. In Lloyd's mind, it was math. Plain, merciless math, and he made sure nobody could miss the message. According to him, Shadur Sanders wasn't just struggling. He was historically bad, by multiple advanced metrics, including EPA per dropback. One of the most complex quarterback stats in all of football, Shadur ranked behind names that NFL fans don't even want to remember. Worse than backups, worse than journeymen, and yes, even worse than Marcus Russell. At first glance, Lloyd's analysis sounded like a death sentence. He wasn't emotional. He wasn't heated. He presented it like a prosecutor delivering hard evidence that should end a case before opening statements were even over. No fluff, just stats. Expected points added. Efficiency ratings. Adjusted rankings for field position, down, distance, score differential, even weather conditions. It was everything you'd expect in an airtight case designed to make any hope look delusional. And make no mistake, there was weight to those numbers. Shadur's efficiency metrics were ugly. His touchdown to interception ratio wasn't great. His completion percentage cratered under pressure. Cleveland's offense continued to spiral with him under center. The data told a brutal story, but that's when the room shifted. Because across the table was G. Bush, and he wasn't having any of it. Not the numbers, not the tone, and especially not the verdict. He didn't push back by cherry-picking stats of his own. He didn't bring his own charts or databases. He brought reality. The kind you can't measure, but every football fan recognizes when they see it. The kind the spreadsheet gang always forgets about context. G. Bush didn't deny Sanders had been inconsistent. He didn't try to spin his way out of the stats. What he did instead was torch the foundation that Lloyd's argument had been built on, brick by brick. Because in football, numbers only tell part of the story. Take a rookie quarterback, drop him into the most chaotic offense in the league, surround him with no weapons, a broken line, zero chemistry, and a coordinator whose job is on the line. What do you expect to see in the numbers? Shadur didn't walk into a functioning team with a support system. He was thrown into a storm. Statistically, Cleveland's offensive line ranked dead last in pass protection. The receivers, even worse in separation metrics, the worst in the league. That's not a supporting cast, that's a setup. And somehow in that environment, a fifth-round rookie is being asked to carry an entire franchise, to save Cleveland football, to post elite metrics behind a wall that crumbles on every snap. G. Bush laid it out without flinching. That's not quarterback play. That's quarterback punishment. Then came the part that really made the audience lean in. G. Bush didn't just challenge Lloyd's argument, he flipped it inside out. If Shadur Sanders really couldn't play, why do coaches keep pointing out improvement? Why are analysts starting to notice flashes of something real? Growth? Footwork, timing, progression, pocket presence, that stuff doesn't show up in one magical game. It builds over time. And in Shadur's tape, it's there. You can hear it in the way G. Bush talks. It's not polished debate club energy. It's raw, straight from a guy who watches the tape, not just the spreadsheets. He knows when a quarterback is being judged unfairly, and in his eyes, that's exactly what's happening in Cleveland. The criticism started with structure. He can't play within it, they said. He's just a one-red scramble guy with a deep ball and hope. So what did Shadur do? He came out the next game and dismantled that take. Quick throws, checkdowns, three-step drops, RPOs. Scripted movement. His average depth of target dropped to 1.9 yards, the second shortest stretch by any quarterback in the last 2 years. That's not hero ball, that's discipline. Suddenly, the narrative changed. No more talk about structure. Now it was efficiency. Okay, he can stay on script, but can he move the needle? Does he make a difference in the actual result? That's when G. Bush snapped. Because now it wasn't about growth, it was about moving goalposts. When a player answers the criticism and the standard just gets raised again, that's not evaluation, that's sabotage. And if that pattern sounds familiar, it's because it's been happening in Cleveland for 2 decades. Quarterback after quarterback gets drafted, thrown into chaos, blamed for the collapse, and tossed aside before they're even finished developing. Then it's rinse and repeat. New guy, new spotlight, same broken foundation underneath. It's predictable, it's cruel. And it's why this debate was never just about Shadur Sanders. It became a mirror. A reflection of everything wrong with how Cleveland operates, not just at quarterback, but across the entire organization. Poor development, knee-jerk reactions, no patience, no plan. So yeah, Jason Lloyd had the numbers, but G. Bush had the story. The real one, the one people feel, the one people see with their own eyes. You can throw EPA charts on the screen all day long, but when you watch a rookie get leveled on every dropback, drop dimes under pressure, and still go back out swinging the next drive, that's something numbers can't capture. By the time that segment ended, the audience wasn't really debating whether Shadur Sanders had a bad stat line. They were questioning the foundation, the dysfunction, the way young talent rots in this franchise with no one asking why the soil's toxic in the first place. That's why G. Bush's words landed like body shots, not just on Jason Lloyd's argument, but on everything the Cleveland Browns continue to do wrong. G. Bush wasn't just defending Shadur Sanders. He was tearing down the entire structure behind how this team, this front office, and this fan base evaluates quarterbacks. What started as a clash between numbers and tape quickly became a full-scale demolition of the stat sheet scouting culture that's infected football debates everywhere. Because in G. Bush's world, the one where games are actually played, not calculated, numbers don't mean a thing without context. Standing across from Jason Lloyd, G. Bush didn't raise his voice at first. He didn't have to. From the moment he opened his mouth, there was a quiet force behind everything he said, a frustration that had clearly been bubbling for far too long. And for once, it wasn't just about protecting a young QB. It was about confronting a deeper dysfunction, a pattern. One Cleveland cannot seem to break. Lloyd kept going back to EPA, expected points added. It's the darling stat of the analytics crowd. A metric that attempts to measure a quarterback's value on a play-by-play basis, adjusting for everything from down and distance to field position and time remaining. It sounds bulletproof, but like G. Bush explained, it's not the full picture. It never was. EPA doesn't tell you who missed their block. It doesn't tell you if the receiver ran the wrong route or got no separation. It doesn't tell you about a head coach calling plays with his job on the line, panicking after every mistake. It doesn't tell you about watching your running back go down with an injury in the first quarter and never getting a clean pocket the entire afternoon. It's dressed up math, valuable in the right hands, dangerous in the wrong ones. Bush drove the point home hard. You don't judge a 5th-round rookie like a 10-year veteran. You don't throw out the word bust when the guys barely had a chance to stand up straight behind the worst line in football. And he was right. Cleveland's offensive line has been a revolving door all season, a crash test site for every young quarterback tossed into it. And this wasn't a one-game blip either. G. Bush rolled through example after example, names every football fan recognized. Kenny Pickett threw for 5 yards in a game and was still hailed as developmentally on track. Jackson Dart's numbers cratered, Cam Ward struggled all season, and somehow no one was rushing to bury those players. But the second Shedeur hits a rough patch, the knives come out. That's where the gloves came off. G. Bush didn't just push back against the narrative. He exposed its hypocrisy. How is a 5th-round rookie expected to look like a franchise quarterback in 5 games when the franchise around him doesn't even function? And that silence from Lloyd? That pause after Bush's follow-up question hit the table? That was the clearest answer of the entire segment. Because here's the truth nobody on the stats side ever wants to admit. Development in the NFL isn't linear. It's chaotic, messy, often illogical. One week, a guy looks ready for Canton. The next, he's getting benched. That's quarterback development in real life. Not on spreadsheets, not on heat maps on the field, in real time. And G. Bush was one of the only voices in that room saying it out loud. He laid it out like this: if Shedeur was walking into a functioning offense, solid line, skilled receivers, competent play calling, and still putting up bad tape, sure, go all in on the numbers. But that's not what's happening. This isn't a quarterback in a decent situation underperforming. This is a quarterback in a nightmare trying to survive. And in the worst possible environment for evaluation, he's still showing signs of growth, still stepping up in the pocket, still leading the team in rushing, still showing poise after taking hits that would shake a veteran. None of that is reflected in his EPA, but it's all over the film. That's where the debate flipped. The audience could feel it. This wasn't about defending Shedeur anymore. It was about taking a hard look at how quarterbacks are developed, or more accurately, destroyed in Cleveland. And when you replay the debate in your head, you realize something important. Jason Lloyd came in trying to end the conversation. Numbers as verdict, math as final word. But G. Bush, with nothing but his passion and his understanding of the game, blew the whole case wide open. He wasn't saying Shadur Sanders is the answer. He wasn't claiming the numbers don't matter. What he said was more dangerous, more honest. That trying to evaluate a quarterback while ignoring context is the fastest way to fool yourself. That dropping a rookie into a broken system and expecting brilliance is fantasy football logic in the real world. That Cleveland's biggest issue isn't deciding if Shedeur is good enough. It's recognizing that no one, no matter how talented, is going to look like the answer when the question is broken from the start. This was supposed to be a debate, but what it became was something far more revealing. A rare moment where stats met soul. G. Bush didn't need numbers to win the argument. He just needed people to open their eyes. And what happened next took things even further, straight into the heart of the Browns' real, unsolved problem. What came next wasn't just a twist in the conversation, it was a gut punch. G. Bush had already made his case for Shadur Sanders, but now he shifted focus completely. He wasn't talking about numbers anymore. He was talking about culture, about history, about the reason this exact debate has been happening on repeat in Cleveland for the last 30 years, and every Browns fan watching knew exactly where he was going. Because when you step back, when you zoom out from the specifics of Shedeur's performance, something starts to become painfully obvious. It's not the quarterback who keeps failing in Cleveland, it's everything around him. The names change, the uniforms change, the eras change, but the results, they never do. This franchise is where quarterback careers go to die, and deep down, the fan base knows it. You don't need an advanced stat to explain it, just look at the timeline. Every few years, it's the same cycle on repeat. Bring in a new QB, hype him up, throw him into chaos, burn through plays, coordinators, and hope, then hit the reset button and start all over again. And here's the part that hit hardest. Cleveland's not just bad at developing quarterbacks, they never really learned how to do it in the first place. Jason Lloyd unknowingly confirmed this himself when he dropped a stat that made the whole conversation feel a little hopeless. Over the last 55 years, the Browns have drafted a quarterback inside the top 20 exactly twice. Tim Couch and Baker Mayfield. That's it. 2 top-tier QB investments in 5 decades. And how did both play out? Tim Couch was a talented prospect dropped into post-expansion madness, sacked nearly 60 times as a rookie, battered behind one of the worst lines in NFL history. His development stalled before it even started. They never gave him a chance. And Baker, a promising, emotional centerpiece mismanaged through coaching changes, conflicting systems, and a complete lack of trust. Ask Browns fans who failed him and they won't say defense, they'll say management. G. Bush didn't pull any punches. This is what the Browns do, he said. They try to shortcut success. They think they can skip the slow, painful work of building a real foundation and make up for it with a quarterback who can carry the entire thing on his back. But that plan doesn't work. Not in the NFL, not anymore, and especially not in a division like this. He brought up the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you could hear every Browns fan across the city grit their teeth. Same division, same brutal AFC North football mentality, but a completely different philosophy. The Steelers, they've had 3 head coaches since the 1960s. That kind of stability is unheard of. They haven't always had elite quarterbacks, but they've always had something more important: structure. A system, an identity, and a front office that doesn't panic every time the wind changes. Meanwhile, Cleveland builds the boat while it's already sinking. Draft a young quarterback, hand him a leaky offensive line, a bottom 5 receiving core, change his OC twice, and wonder why he never lived up to expectations. It's not a mystery. It's malpractice. And this, right here, is what made the whole debate so important. Because for once, it wasn't just about, should we keep this guy, or the numbers say he's bad. It turned into something so much more vital, a mirror held up to the franchise itself. See, this whole time people were debating Shedeur's talent, but few were asking the harder question, even if he was great, would it even matter in this system? Imagine dropping a young, developing quarterback into a situation where no part of the offense is functioning. Where you're constantly pressured before you can hit your third step. Where your biggest passing weapons can't create room. Where your defense keeps games close, but your offense can't score 21. That's not bad luck. That's a broken infrastructure. Jason Lloyd had great data, some of the best in the business. But G. Bush had the proof, not on a spreadsheet, but on the field every single Sunday. That no quarterback, not Brady, not Mahomes, not Lamar, could walk into this version of Cleveland and succeed. Because it's not about who's under center. It's about what they're walking into. Even the most casual Browns fans know the play-by-play at this point. Watch a promising QB get eaten alive behind a weak offensive line. Hear excuses. See internal leaks to the media blaming the player. Then draft a new guy and pretend this time will be different. That's what this debate exposed. The real villain hasn't been under center. It's been in the front office. The coaching carousel, the poor drafts, the refusal to invest heavily in building before asking a new quarterback to perform miracles. And worst of all, the constant changing of criteria. Can't play in structure? Okay, he learns to. Now it's, he's efficient but not spectacular. Next, he's accurate but doesn't have the ceiling. And if somehow he solves that too, well, he was just a 5th-round pick. Let's go get someone with more pedigree. It never ends. That's not evaluation. That's sabotage disguised as evidence. And in that studio, in a single segment, G. Bush ripped the curtain back on it all. Because once you realize it's not really about whether a QB is good enough, you begin to see the truth. No one is good enough to survive the system in Cleveland. Not yet. And the scariest part of all. The Browns don't even seem to realize they've built the kind of environment that guarantees their own failure, and makes debates like this one feel less like analysis and more like autopsies. The moment Shadur Sanders checked one box, they just moved the goalpost. That was the part that truly broke open the debate, when G. Bush laid out how the narrative around this kid wasn't just unfair, it was intentionally designed to be unwinnable. One week it's, he can't play within structure. The next week he does exactly that, goes full rhythm passing, executes the short game, hits his checkdowns, manages the offense cleanly, and somehow within 24 hours, that win gets rewritten as a new loss. Well, now he's too conservative. He's not making enough explosive plays. It's a game with no finish line, and everyone watching saw it happen in real time. Against Buffalo, Shedeur posted one of the most structured, cleanest performances of his young career. He wasn't out there freelancing. He wasn't launching desperation bombs. He played on schedule, which was exactly what everyone claimed he wasn't capable of doing just a week earlier. His average depth of target? Just 1.9 yards, one of the lowest recorded across any quarterback in the NFL over the last 2 seasons. That number alone should have ended the backyard QB accusations. For most rookies, playing mistake-free football in a scripted rhythm system would be seen as development. Growth, a step forward. But in Cleveland, it was labeled a loss because it wasn't flashy, because it didn't win the game, because they'd already moved on to a new narrative. Now it's, he doesn't elevate the offense. And G. Bush called it out for exactly what it was, a trap, a setup. The kind of pattern where a quarterback can improve and still be tossed aside, simply because the expectations refuse to stabilize long enough to fairly judge him. And that's where the anger crept in, not just from G. Bush, but from fans watching across the city. Because this goalpost movement isn't new. It's baked into the Browns' DNA. It's what they've done with quarterback after quarterback, regime after regime, season after season. As soon as one narrative collapses, a new one steps in to replace it. The process never ends because, deep down, the people setting the expectations aren't actually interested in development, they're chasing instant results. And if they don't like what they see within 5 or 6 starts, it's over. But here's the hard truth no one in the analytics crowd wants to say out loud. Quarterbacks don't develop on a straight line. They don't become stars overnight. They plateau. They regress. They adjust. Some things click instantly, others take time. Pocket feel, protection calls, read mapping, confidence coming off an interception. Those things aren't calculated on EPA formulas. They show up in moments, habits, reactions to pressure, and if you're only watching the box score, you'll miss all of it. That's what G. Bush was yelling about, not statistics, but reality. You cannot declare final judgment on a quarterback 5 starts into a dysfunctional situation. Not when the offensive line can't block for more than 2 seconds. Not when your number 1 receiver leads the league in drops. Not when your coordinator changes the tempo every drive just to survive till halftime. That's not football development. That's damage control. And somehow, Shedur's being asked to audition like he's walking into year 4 of a playoff-caliber roster. And the worst part? It keeps happening. Because the minute he adjusts again, say, he finds explosive plays next week, hits a few 40-yard seams, finishes with 300-plus yards and a score, someone's going to say, sure, but is he consistent? Or, that was against a bad defense, let's see him do it against a top 10 team. It's a game designed for him to lose. The criteria never stabilizes. The language shifts. The standards inflate. And every time he answers the question, a new one appears, sharper, harder, more unrealistic than the one before. It's not just unfair. It's manipulative. That's what made G. Bush's position hit so hard, because he wasn't even arguing that Shedeur has arrived. He wasn't pretending Sanders is a Pro Bowl talent today. What made the moment powerful was the truth underneath it. This kid is learning, improving, adapting in real time under pressure without support, and people are still out here acting like he's supposed to look like Justin Herbert by week 5. It's ridiculous, and it's familiar, because we've all seen it before. It happened with Baker Mayfield. First, he was the savior. Then the system changed. Then the coach didn't trust him. Then the performance slipped. Then the whispers started. Maybe his ceiling is limited. Maybe he's not elite. 1 year later, gone, new guy in, new narrative launched, different lead, same script. And now the Browns are reaching the same checkpoint again, staring down the barrel of another top draft pick, looking at Cam Ward and thinking, maybe this one will be different. But it won't. Not until they change something else. Because what this debate really exposed wasn't just a disagreement about Shedeur's skill level. Revealed something darker, Cleveland's complete inability to stick with a developmental arc. The moment it gets hard, they pivot. The moment a young QB struggles, they look toward the next guy. It's an addiction to starting over. And that addiction doesn't just ruin quarterbacks, it ruins teams. What if, just once, they stayed the course? What if they acknowledged the progress, planned for the next step in development, and actually surrounded a young QB with talent instead of criticism? That's the part people like Jason Lloyd, and sadly, a huge chunk of the media, continue to overlook. They think accountability is just pointing to the numbers and asking, is he elite yet? But real accountability is asking the tougher question, why hasn't this organization created a stable enough structure for any quarterback to grow within? Until they answer that, until the goalposts stop shifting and the timeline stops resetting every 18 months, it won't matter who the quarterback is. Whether it's Shedeur, Cam Ward, or the next can't-miss prospect, the machine stays broken. The outcome stays the same. And as G. Bush made painfully clear, Cleveland fans are tired of watching the same movie on repeat. By the time G. Bush peeled back all the layers of the Shadur Sanders debate, it became impossible to ignore the bigger truth. This wasn't a quarterback controversy. It was a franchise in crisis, one that's been stuck in the same self-destructive loop for over 30 years. And the timeline? It's as ugly as it is familiar. You don't have to be a football historian to see the pattern. It's so obvious, it's almost comical until you realize it's the reason Cleveland hasn't built a functional team since the Clinton administration. Draft a quarterback, hype him up, throw him into dysfunction, blame him when it collapses, fire the coach, fire the GM, tear it all down, repeat, again and again, over and over. A rebuild every 3 seasons, a reboot every 2. And at the center of it all, a team that's never understood what it takes to develop a quarterback, only how to draft and discard them. And the evidence isn't old. It's current. Right now, Shadur Sanders is staring down the exact same pipeline that swallowed every Browns quarterback who came before him. It's the same system that let Deshaun Kaiser drown with zero protection and no mentorship. The same one that turned Baker Mayfield, a fiery, scrappy former number 1 pick, into damaged goods before he even finished his rookie contract. The same machine that burned through Tyrod Taylor, Johnny Manziel, Cody Kessler, Brandon Weeden, Colt McCoy, and pretty much every other name you've forgotten from that jersey of misery with 32 names taped on the back. That's not just a quarterback problem. That's a culture problem. And when Jason Lloyd rattled off Shedeur's historically low efficiency numbers, what he left out was this. Every quarterback that's worn a Browns jersey post-1999 has dealt with the exact same wreckage. Different names. Same fate. So when Lloyd tries to hold Shedeur's early struggles against him, it's G. Bush and basically every fan with common sense who asks the real question. If none of these guys could succeed here, at what point do you stop blaming the players? And it's not just about the quarterbacks. It's everything around them. The offensive line has ranked bottom tier in pass protection more times than fans can count. They've rotated offensive coordinators like cafeteria staff. They haven't had offensive consistency for more than one season in over a decade. And let's not even talk about the receivers. In recent years, Cleveland hasn't just lacked a true WR1, they've gone entire seasons without wideouts who can generate real separation. You want to know what quarterbacks need to succeed? It's not magic. It's not just talent, it's timing, consistency, repetition, chemistry with play callers, trust in the line, stable leadership from the top down. Give a young quarterback even 2 or 3 of those and you have a shot at development. Take them all away like Cleveland consistently does and you don't create a learning environment, you create a trap. The Browns don't produce quarterbacks, they break them. Even ones that showed promise elsewhere. And when the host panel tried to pretend this is just about EPA stats or efficiency metrics, G. Bush snapped that illusion in half. Because this isn't about analytics, it's about history. We've seen the same outcome now with different scouts, GMs, owners, philosophies. Doesn't matter. The results are always the same. The Browns don't need a new QB, they need a new identity. One that doesn't change with every wind gust. One that doesn't panic every time a rookie throws a pick. One that doesn't start shopping for the next guy before the current one even gets his jersey dry cleaned. That's why the comparison to the Pittsburgh Steelers triggered so many fans. Not because Pittsburgh's elite at talent evaluation, they've had their misses too, but because they've built an ecosystem that allows players to actually fail without being replaced, where development is part of the journey, not an excuse to hit the reset button. In contrast, Cleveland builds a new offense every 18 months. Even the few times they've had something good, they couldn't keep it together long enough to evolve. They refuse to build around strengths because they're too obsessed with fixing weaknesses. And in doing so, they never actually grow. So when G. Bush ripped the panel for pretending Shedeur's issues are purely individual, he wasn't just defending a young quarterback. He was exposing the rot that made failure feel inevitable before Sanders even took his first snap. The line isn't there. The receivers aren't there. The coaching isn't there. The patience isn't there. But somehow, the expectations skyrocket anyway. And the saddest part, this isn't even new. The Browns have tried everything. Hotshot offensive minds. Defensive disciplinarians. Player-friendly environments. Old-school grinders. Every flavor of front office you can imagine, and nothing sticks. Because what Cleveland keeps refusing to understand is that no quarterback can save you until you build something worth being saved. A young quarterback, no matter how gifted, is not a repair tool. He can't fix a broken line, call audibles for receivers who run wrong routes, or hide the cracks in an unstable organization. And yet, Cleveland continues to act like they can solve all their problems with one draft pick, one first-round savior, one Cam Ward, one Caleb Williams, one more try. But how many one more tries does it take before the problem isn't the pick, it's the people picking? That's the part that made this segment hit so hard. Shadur Sanders isn't being judged fairly because no Browns quarterback has ever been judged fairly. They're evaluated through pounding losses, unstable scripts, and headlines about what they aren't rather than what they could be. G. Bush wasn't making excuses. He was exposing patterns, the exact kind that make a franchise rot from the inside out. Until that stops, it won't matter who's under center. Because at this point, it's not about the quarterback failing Cleveland. It's about Cleveland continuing to fail every quarterback. And here's the part that makes this whole thing impossible to ignore. For all the chaos, for all the bad numbers, for all the noise around him, Shadur Sanders is actually getting better. Not in some fairy tale, overnight superstar way, not in a he just flipped a switch and now he's elite way. In the real way, the hard way, the way that never shows up cleanly on a spreadsheet. You can see it in the tape if you're actually watching. Early on, the big knock was simple and loud. He couldn't play in structure. He was labeled a one-read deep shot hunter, a guy who bilaid out of the pocket at the first sign of pressure and turned every drop back into a backyard scramble drill. That was the book on him. But slowly, almost quietly, that book started to change. One week, he comes out and works the quick game. Snap, set, ball out. Slants, flats, hitches, quick outs. No panic, no bailing, no desperate rollout to his right just to find air. The very next week, the talk shifts. Now he's stepping up instead of bailing back. You see him feel the edge rush, hitch forward, keep his eyes downfield, and hit a checkdown instead of taking a drive-killing sack. That's not accidental. That's development. Former quarterbacks who have watched the film have pointed it out too. Guys like Chase Daniel and others have talked about the same thing G. Bush keeps saying. The progression is there. It's not perfect, but it's real. The footwork is cleaner. The timing is sharper. The ball is coming out on time more often. And when the pocket holds for even a second longer than usual, you can see he knows where to go with it. Then there's the deep ball. For all the talk about short passes and EPA, nobody can deny this. When Shedeur has a window, he can drop it in. Touch down the sideline. Layer throws over underneath defenders and in front of safeties. Those aren't fluke throws. That's touch. That's feel. And beyond the arm, beyond the mechanics, there's something else people keep coming back to: his toughness. This is a quarterback who's led the team in rushing multiple weeks in a row, not because he's in some designed run offense, but because the pocket keeps collapsing and he refuses to just take the sack. He takes hits, gets back up, and still stands in there the next time. That wears on a guy. For a lot of young quarterbacks, it breaks them. You can see them flinch. Shedeur, you don't see flinch. You see frustration, sure, but you also see fight. That's why when people like Jason Lloyd pull out the worst ever label, it rings hollow to the people actually watching the games. The worst ever doesn't show growth. The worst ever doesn't hang in a collapsed pocket and deliver timing routes one week, then adjust his drops the next, then fix his eyes and progressions after that. The worst ever gets worse. Shedeur is doing the opposite. It doesn't mean he's a star. It doesn't mean the Browns have their franchise quarterback locked in. But it does mean this: there is enough on film to at least ask whether the smart move is to finally build around someone, instead of throwing him away the second the numbers dip below some historical line. When G. Bush said, "You have to look at a bad team and ask, can I get better with this guy?" That was the entire point. You can't look at a stat sheet and see that. You find that answer in the small things. Does he climb instead of drift? Does he throw with anticipation when a route hasn't fully broken? Do his teammates respond to him when the game is slipping away? Does he shrink in big moments, or does he keep trying to make something happen even when everyone around him is failing? Those are traits. And traits are what you bet on when the situation is bad. By that standard, Shedeur isn't a finished product. He's a project with clear, visible upside. A developing quarterback in a toxic situation who still manages to flash things you can't manufacture. Poise, arm talent, competitive toughness. You can work with that. You can coach that. You can build around that, if you choose to. But that's where the real tension in this whole story sits. Because the Browns aren't just staring at a flawed young quarterback with some intriguing tools. They're staring at him while also staring at the draft board and the potential of a top 2 pick. On one side, you have the raw prospect already in your building, already taking hits, already learning your playbook and your teammates' tendencies. On the other, you have the idea of a cleaner prospect, a Cam Ward type. A guy scouts say is more polished, more pro-ready, more worthy of that golden draft slot. And this franchise, maybe more than any other in the league, has a habit of falling in love with the idea of the next guy. That's the crossroads. Do you finally commit to developing the quarterback you already have, flaws and all? Or do you hit reset again, drop a new name into the same broken setup, and hope this time the outcome will be different? Because if Shadur Sanders really does have the traits G. Bush and other film guys see, and if Cleveland once again chooses to ignore those signs in favor of chasing the next promise, then this isn't just another quarterback debate. It's a test. A test of whether this franchise has actually learned anything before it steps into yet another draft with yet another answer staring them in the face. And that's where the entire conversation turns from a TV argument into a real franchise crisis. Because this isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening with the Browns sitting near the bottom of the league, staring directly at a top 2 pick in the upcoming draft. That changes everything. A bad team with a late first-rounder can talk about patience, development, building slowly. But a team sitting at the top of the board? That's a different kind of pressure. That reset the franchise territory. That's the kind of pick you get maybe once a decade if you're unlucky enough to earn it. And Cleveland has been unlucky for a long time. Rumors are already swirling about what they could do. Names like Cam Ward get tossed around as the kind of league-ready guy this front office might fall in love with. A fresh start, cleaner mechanics, higher pedigree coming out. The kind of quarterback prospect who was built in the lab for draft rooms that crave traits and polish. And Jason Lloyd's position in that studio was crystal clear. If you're picking that high, you take a quarterback. Period. History, in his mind, backs that up. Franchise quarterbacks rarely come from outside the top 10. Most true long-term answers are early picks. The data says it. The league's last 20 years prove it. And Cleveland has already demonstrated they can't turn late-round projects into stars. So, his argument goes, if you have the shot, you pull the trigger. On paper, that sounds airtight. But then G. Bush laid out the other side, and it was brutal in its simplicity. You're gonna draft another quarterback, he basically said. And do what? Throw him behind the same broken offensive line. Hand him the same receivers who can't separate. Let him walk into the same building that hasn't developed one consistent offensive identity in decades, and expect a different result. That's the trap. You either stick with a fifth-round pick whose numbers, to this point, are historically bad, or you hit reset and risk feeding another young quarterback into the same shredder. Neither choice is clean. Both are risky. And that's exactly why this debate has hit such a nerve with Browns fans. Because for once, it's not as simple as take the better prospect. There is no clean slate when the slate itself is cracked. If you move on from Shedeur and draft a new quarterback at number 2, you're not just gambling on the new guy. You're admitting, again, that the plan you sold fans 2 years ago is already dead. Another rebuild. Another shift in identity. Another OC tailoring a system to another rookie, while the roster holes at receiver, offensive line, and depth remain untouched. And yet, if you don't draft a quarterback there, now you're committing the near unthinkable in today's league. Passing on a premium QB prospect in favor of a fifth-rounder with ugly analytics, banking everything on your ability to build a stable environment around him. You're betting not just on Shedeur, but on your own capacity to change. To finally become the kind of franchise that develops instead of destroys. That's why G. Bush's point hit so dangerously close to home. This organization hasn't earned that trust. Fans have watched top picks get wasted on panic choices. They've seen quarterbacks swapped out like bad parts while the engine itself keeps misfiring. They've lived through win now and tear it all down so many times that both phrases feel meaningless. So now, Cleveland is stuck in a corner of its own making. Option 1, take a quarterback high, sell hope again, and risk repeating the exact same script. New face, same ending. Option 2, keep Shedeur, invest that top pick in an elite tackle, dominant wideout, or cornerstone player somewhere else, and pray that real support finally lets a young quarterback grow. But if it doesn't work, if Shedeur doesn't become that guy, then you've burned a rare draft position and delayed the inevitable reset even longer. It's a franchise riddle with no easy answer. And it's made worse by the fact that both Jason Lloyd and G. Bush have logic on their side. Jason's right. The numbers are bad, and top-tier quarterbacks almost always come from the top of the board. The odds are in favor of drafting a blue-chip prospect when you're that high. But G. Bush is right too. It doesn't matter who you draft if you keep dropping them into the same unstable mess. No quarterback, no matter how talented, can carry a franchise that refuses to build an actual structure around him. That's why this moment feels so critical. This isn't just another off-season decision. It feels like the decision. Do you bet on numbers or bet on traits? Do you trust a system that's failed repeatedly or take the terrifying step of actually changing how you operate? And wrapped up inside all that is one more uncomfortable reality. Whatever they do next, move on from Sanders or build around him, they're going to reveal exactly who they are as a franchise. Not who they say they are in press conferences. Who they are when it's time to choose between the quick fix and the hard road. Between another flashy quarterback selection or the slower, less glamorous work of repairing the foundation they've ignored for far too long. Because drafting a new quarterback is easy. Selling fans on the next savior? Easy. Committing to the long, difficult process of development through bad games, bad stretches, growing pains, and ugly stat lines, that's the part Cleveland has never shown they're willing to do. And the whole time this argument played out on air, that was the unspoken question hanging over every word. Is this franchise finally ready to change how it handles quarterbacks? Or is Shadur Sanders just the next name on a very long list of wasted chances? The crazy part is, for all the arguing, all the charts, all the emotion on that set, there was a moment where you realized something uncomfortable. Everybody might be right, and it still might not matter. Jason Lloyd isn't lying about the numbers. You can pull up the data yourself. By advanced efficiency metrics, by EPA per dropback, by red zone production, Shadur Sanders lands at or near the bottom of the league. Historically low. That's real. It's not made up. His stat profile doesn't look like a future star. It looks like a warning sign. But G. Bush isn't lying either. Turn the sound off, watch the tape, ignore the spreadsheets for a minute, and you see a different story. You see a kid trying to operate in one of the ugliest offensive situations in football. You see progression in spots. You see bad habits getting cleaned up. You see a quarterback learning, even while everything around him is falling apart. That's what makes this debate so raw. It's not numbers versus feelings. It's numbers versus context. Efficiency charts versus reality. And Cleveland has lived in that gap for decades. Because while everyone is arguing over whether Shedeur is good enough, they're missing the more important point: the Browns aren't good enough. Not as an organization. Not yet. This is a franchise that's been called the most dysfunctional team in the NFL, and it's not some overdramatic label. Look at the evidence. Coaches fired mid-rebuild. Schemes abandoned after one bad year. Quarterbacks moved in and out like they're streaming options, not human beings asked to learn a new system every 16 months. It's chaos dressed up as strategy. In that kind of environment, what do the numbers even mean? If a quarterback for the Steelers posts a bottom-tier EPA over a season, that tells you something specific about him, because the infrastructure is stable. The system is proven. The line is usually above average. The front office is patient. In that world, bad numbers point at the player. In Cleveland, bad numbers might be pointing at everybody else. That was the heart of G. Bush's anger. Not that analytics are useless, but that they're being weaponized without accountability for the people who built the mess. The front office that failed to protect their quarterback. The coaches who failed to design around his strengths. The personnel department that left him with receivers who can't get open and a line that can't block. It's easy to say, the EPA says he's terrible. It's harder to ask, what does it say about us that every quarterback who comes here looks terrible by year 2? And this is where the conversation stopped being just about Shedeur and turned into a reflection of Cleveland's football soul. Because deep down, fans know the truth. They've seen too many young passers come and go to still believe this is all coincidence. Every few years, the city gets a new hope. A fresh face, a new swagger, another press conference selling belief in a new era. And every few years, that belief gets chewed up and spit onto the turf at the 50-yard line. Different quarterback. Same story. You can feel the fatigue in the fan base. When G. Bush says, you can't keep resetting the clock every 2 years, that's not just analysis. That's a plea. A plea to stop pretending that the only missing piece is always the guy under center, and never the people making the decisions above him. Because here's the frightening possibility that hangs over this whole Shadur Sanders debate: he might not be the long-term answer. He might never become a top 10 quarterback. He might just be a tough, talented, flawed player who tops out as average. But even if that's true, what if it also doesn't matter? What if the real danger isn't that they stick with the wrong quarterback, but that no matter who they choose, they treat him exactly the same way? Draft Cam Ward, the cycle starts over. Bring in another big name, same story. Throw him behind a bad line, rush the process, panic when the stats dip, and start scouting the next guy before this one finishes his first contract. At some point, it stops being bad luck. It becomes identity. And that's what this argument exposed more clearly than any press conference ever has. The Browns don't have a quarterback identity. They don't have a unified vision of what they want at the position, how they want to develop it, and how long they're willing to live with growing pains. The Steelers do. The Ravens do. The Chiefs do. Those teams know exactly what they are offensively, and they plug quarterbacks into that identity. Cleveland does the opposite. They plug quarterbacks in, then scramble to figure out the identity on the fly. Meanwhile, guys like Shedeur become collateral damage. So when Jason Lloyd drops the worst ever tag and G. Bush fires back with "look what he's working with," they're not just disagreeing on a player. They're disagreeing on what responsibility looks like. Is responsibility pointing to the stat sheet and saying, these numbers aren't good enough? Or is it turning around and asking, what did we do or fail to do that helped make these numbers this bad? One thing is certain, Cleveland can't keep dodging that second question. Because until they answer it, none of this changes. Not Shedeur's trajectory, not Cam Ward's potential, not the outcome of the next draft. You can switch out the quarterback all you want. If the system stays rotten, the results stay the same. That's the quiet part this whole debate said out loud. Shadur Sanders might be a long shot. He might be a work in progress. He might be gone in a year, or he might grow into something no one saw coming once he actually gets protection and weapons. All of that is possible. But focusing only on him like he's the entire problem or the entire solution is exactly how this franchise stays stuck. Because this was never just a debate about one rookie. It was an X-ray of the Browns themselves. The spreadsheet said one thing, the film said another. The truth. It's somewhere in between, buried under years of instability, mismanagement, and impatience. And until Cleveland finally decides to fix that, every quarterback discussion they have, whether it's Shadur Sanders, Cam Ward, or the next can't-miss prospect, is just going to be another rerun of the same story fans here already know by heart. At the end of the day, that's what made this whole thing so wild to watch. You tuned in thinking you were going to see a simple argument about one guy, is Shadur Sanders good enough or not? By the time it was over, you weren't really thinking about Shadur anymore. You were thinking about the Browns, about how many times you've seen this exact movie with a different lead. G. Bush versus Jason Lloyd wasn't just a clash of opinions. It was two completely different ways of looking at football smashing into each other on live air. One side saying, the numbers are the truth. The other saying, not without the story behind them. And the uncomfortable part is both sides had receipts. Lloyd came in with his research, his EPA charts, his historical comps, and on the surface, it all made sense. By those standards, Shadur Sanders looks like a disaster. A fifth-round rookie putting up production that lines up with some of the ugliest quarterback seasons of the last 20 years. If you want to shut the book right there, you can. But then you listen to G. Bush. You look at the film, you remember the context. Worst line in the league. Bottom of the barrel in receiver separation. A revolving door of instability on offense. A fan base that's been told this is the guy so many times, they barely feel it anymore. And suddenly, that cold, clean, mathematical verdict doesn't feel so clean. Shadur isn't some flawless hidden gem. He's not secretly a top 5 quarterback trapped in a bad situation. He's a young, developing player with real flaws and real tools, thrown into one of the worst environments in the NFL. That's the reality. What you choose to do with that reality is where this franchise either grows up or doesn't. Because this isn't actually about picking sides in some TV segment. It's about what comes next. If Cleveland looks at those numbers, listens only to Jason Lloyd's side, and decides Shadur Sanders is already a finished product, they'll move on. They'll take a quarterback high. They'll tell fans this is the reset that finally works. They'll talk about upside and arm talent and pro-ready processing. And maybe, for a few months, everyone will feel that familiar jolt of hope again. But if nothing else changes, if the line stays leaky, the receivers stay subpar, the patience stays thin, and the identity stays undefined, then it won't matter whether it's Shadur, Cam Ward, or the next hyped name walking onto that field. The same machine will chew them up just like it always has. On the other hand, if the Browns actually absorb what G. Bush was saying, really absorb it, they might do something they almost never do: commit. Not blindly, not stubbornly, but intentionally. Commit to fixing the offensive line. Commit to finding real weapons, not just patchwork pieces. Commit to one offensive vision and riding through the bumps instead of slamming the eject button the second the stats look ugly. And then, within that context, make a decision on Shadur Sanders, because there's a world where they look at him and say, we see the growth, but the upside isn't high enough. We're still drafting a quarterback. There's also a world where they say, we see enough traits here to build around him. Let's use this pick on someone who can help him, not replace him. Both paths are risky. Both can be defended. But only one question really matters. Is this about finding the perfect quarterback? Or about finally becoming the kind of team a quarterback can actually thrive in? That's the part nobody can answer with a spreadsheet. That's not an EPA problem. That's not a film grade problem. That's a soul of the franchise problem. And Cleveland has been dodging it for 30 years. So, yeah, G. Bush baked Jason Lloyd on live TV. He tore holes in the idea that you can proclaim a fifth-round rookie, a historic failure 5, starts into a train wreck season. He forced the conversation past the surface-level numbers and into the uncomfortable places this franchise never likes to go. But the harshest blows weren't aimed at Jason. They were aimed at the Browns. Because until this organization stops treating quarterbacks like magic wands and starts treating them like investments, long-term, fragile, and worth protecting, nothing changes. Not the stats, not the records. not the jerseys hanging in closets across Ohio with names fans are tired of pretending to believe in. Shadur Sanders might be the guy. He might not be. The truth is, nobody really knows yet, no matter how confident they sound on TV or online. What we do know is this: if Cleveland doesn't fix what's broken around him, his outcome is already written. Same as the ones who came before him, same as the ones who will come after. And that's the real tragedy this debate accidentally revealed. This was never just about whether one quarterback is good enough for the Browns. It was about whether the Browns are finally ready to be good enough for a quarterback. Until that answer changes, the faces will. The names will. The hope will. The ending won't.